I spent about 20 minutes last October in front of a display table at a bookshop, Banned Books Week. The whole table wrapped in yellow caution tape. A bookseller was explaining it to a teenager who drifted over from the manga. She told him these were the books that get pulled from schools, and she said it was mostly language and sex. The kid nodded. It's a reasonable thing to say. It's what nearly everyone says. While she was saying it, I was holding a copy of The Chocolate War. It was sitting about 8 inches from her elbow. It's a novel about a boy at a Catholic school who declines to sell chocolates. There's almost no sex in it. Its profanity wouldn't trouble a modern 11-year-old. And it has been challenged in American schools more consistently and for longer than most of the books stacked around it. The book on the table disproved the sign on the table. Nobody noticed, including me. For 4 more months, go back through the transcripts and the judgments, and a pattern comes up that the caution tape doesn't prepare you for. The objection is almost never in the middle of the book. It's at the back. Strip the period costume off the censor's argument, and it's the same argument every time. Across 150 years. The book ends wrong. Paris, 1857. The first modern obscenity trial of a novel. Gustave Flaubert, prosecuted over Madame Bovary, and the prosecutor is a man named Ernest Pinard. His case is worth reading mostly for what isn't in it. He barely complains about what Emma does. Adultery had been on the page in French fiction for generations, and the courts had survived it. What he can't forgive is that the novel contains no voice that condemns her. There's no judge inside the book. Then he reaches the ending, and he stops sounding bored. Emma dies of arsenic, and Flaubert makes it take a very long time. Charles dies too. Their daughter is sent to work in a cotton mill, and the last line of the novel isn't about any of them. It's about Homais, the pharmacist, the fraud whose vanity did as much as anything to kill her. One sentence, flat, reporting that he has just been awarded the Legion of Honor. Flaubert was acquitted on the 7th of February, 1857. The prosecution lost. But look at what Pinard actually wanted. He never asked for the adultery to come out. He asked for the last page to be a sentence. 71 years later, the same instinct turns up in London, wearing a better suit. Radcliffe Hall published The Well of Loneliness in 1928. The most physically explicit line in the entire novel is a statement that 2 women were not divided that night. That is the sum total of the obscenity. The editor of the Sunday Express wrote that he would sooner hand a healthy child a phial of poison than that book. In November, the chief magistrate, Sir Chartres Byron, ordered it destroyed. And here's the part that gives the game away. Roughly 40 witnesses turned up to defend the novel, including Virginia Woolf and E.M. Forster, and the court declined to hear them. Literary merit was ruled irrelevant. Whether it was a good book was formally none of the court's business, which tells you the case was never about the book. It was about the last chapter. Stephen Gordon does not repent. She is not cured. She is not quietly killed off the way the period demanded. She stands there and asks for the right to exist. Every act described in that novel was legal in Britain in 1928. The ending was not. 5 years on, it happens again, inside the most consequential obscenity ruling in American literary history. United States versus one book, called Ulysses, decided the 6th of December, 1933. The passages the government leaned on sat almost entirely in the final episode, Molly Bloom's soliloquy, 40-odd pages of unpunctuated monologue that closed the book. Judge Woolsey's verdict on it was that it was in places nauseating and nowhere aphrodisiac, which remains the driest review Ulysses has ever received. What makes that chapter dangerous in 1933 isn't the frankness. The rule it actually breaks is that it never resolves into judgment. The novel stops on assent. Nobody is sentenced. Now the story stops being about morality and starts being about money. In 1930, the American film industry adopted the Motion Picture Production Code, and from 1934, the Production Code Administration enforced it with real teeth. The machinery was a doctrine called compensating moral values. You could depict wrongdoing in detail, provided the resolution punished it. It isn't a rule about content, it's a rule about Act 3. Under the code, you could show almost anything, so long as you sent the bill at the end. And the studios didn't invent those films out of nothing. They bought novels. I'll be straight with you. I went looking for a clean figure on what film rights were worth to a novel's income in the 30s and 40s, and couldn't find one I'd be willing to say out loud, so I won't. But the shape of the incentive isn't ambiguous. The code's demand landed on precisely one part of a manuscript. Not the sex, not the violence, the ending. A novel with a punishing final chapter could be sold twice. A novel that refused to punish could only be sold once. So the pressure on the ending walked out of the courtroom and into the acquisitions meeting, where it didn't have to ban anything. The incentive did the work. So, you, standing in front of a table with caution tape on it, the bookseller's explanation feels true because it accurately describes the complaint. Complaints get written in the language of content, because content is what you can point at and read into a microphone at a school board meeting. Nobody has ever filed a challenge form saying the final chapter withholds its verdict. That is very often what the form means, and every time you've picked up a contemporary literary novel and found that it ends without telling you what to think, the final image left unresolved, you closing it faintly unsatisfied and privately assuming this is simply what serious fiction does now, you have been holding the result of everything I've just described. That habit has a history. It didn't begin as a preference. It began as a way of not getting convicted. Back to the book in my hand. Robert Cormier published The Chocolate War in 1974. A boy refuses to sell chocolates for the school fundraiser. The school's secret society breaks him. The corrupt teacher profits. Nothing is repaired and no adult arrives to set anything right. The last movement of the novel is Jerry, badly beaten, telling his friend that the lesson is not to disturb the universe. Take the chocolates. Sell them. Cormier had opened the book with the line from Prufrock, "Do I dare disturb the universe?" and then spent 200 pages answering it. No. By his own account, he was asked to change that ending before publication. He said no to that as well. The Chocolate War appears on the American Library Association's list of the 100 most frequently challenged books for the 1990s and again for the 2000s. The challenge forms cite violence and language. The violence is a fist fight. The language would pass on daytime television. What's genuinely unbearable in that book is the last 20 pages. There's one more case, and it bends the whole story out of shape. Anthony Burgess wrote A Clockwork Orange in 1962, 21 chapters. The number was deliberate because 21 is the age of legal majority, and the structure was the argument. In that 21st chapter, Alex, a few years older, finds he's bored of violence. He starts wanting a son, a life, something ordinary. The state's cure was never necessary because people grow out of it. That's the thesis of the novel. All of it. Sitting in the final chapter. The American publisher cut it. Norton issued the 1963 United States edition, with 20 chapters, ending instead on Alex restored to his appetites. Stanley Kubrick worked from the American edition. His 1971 film ends where the amputated book ends. Burgess spent the rest of his life explaining that the conclusion the English-speaking world believed was his was not his. Now look at what got removed, not the violence. Every page of that stayed exactly where it was. What got cut was the redemption. What got cut was the moral resolution. The precise thing Ernest Pinard stood up in a Paris courtroom in 1857 and demanded. 1857. A prosecutor tries to force a novel to end in judgment. 1963. A publisher deletes a novel's judgment because it won't sell. The pressure never left the ending. It reversed polarity. 100 years of censors had taught novelists one very specific lesson, that an ending which refuses to resolve is an ending that can't be convicted. And somewhere around the middle of the 20th century, the market finished learning it too and began enforcing it from the opposite direction. The defense became the style. The scar tissue became the skin, and the ending that got cut was the hopeful one. The bookseller finished, and the kid drifted back toward the manga. The table stayed up all week, with a card in the middle listing the charges: language, sexual content, drugs, violence. The usual indictment, printed in a friendly font. The chocolate war sat in the middle of it, challenged for 50 years for a reason that appears nowhere on that card. 2 books along there was a copy of A Clockwork Orange, and I'd bet almost nobody in that shop had ever read the ending of it because the ending isn't in the edition they were sold. The tape was on the front of the table. The crime was always at the back of the book.